Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. On Velos 13, survival was the only thing that mattered. The air was thin, the food supply dwindling, and the endless horizon stretched into a bleak, barren wasteland. The sky hung low with thick clouds of dust from the endless storms that tore through the mining camps, now long abandoned. Eva stood on the ridge, looking over the makeshift camp where she and the others had carved out their meager existence, a group of orphans, left to fend for themselves in a place no one cared about anymore. Eva had taken charge. She had to. No one else seemed willing to make the hard decisions. At 16, she was one of the oldest, and the others had learned to rely on her. Every day was a battle, not just against hunger or the cold, but against the crushing weight of isolation. They had no way off this planet, no communications with the outside world. The adults who had once mined Velos 13 were dead, and the few ships that had come for supplies hadn't returned in months. "We're running low on rations again," Kai said, standing beside her. His face was pale, worn from the harsh reality of life here. He was only a year younger than her, but he'd seen more than enough hardship for a lifetime. "I know," Eva replied, her voice steady. She couldn't afford to show fear or uncertainty. "Not now. We'll send a team out tomorrow to scavenge further north." Kai nodded, but she saw the doubt in his eyes. They had already scavenged most of the nearby colonies. All they ever found were broken down equipment, rusted tools, and empty storage units. Food was scarce, and every trip seemed to take them farther into the dangerous, uncharted zones of the planet. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the jagged terrain, the camp settled into a restless quiet. Eva sat near the fire, watching the flames flicker as the younger orphans gathered close for warmth. Liam, a boy with shaggy dark hair and a chip on his shoulder, sat apart from the others, sharpening a piece of scrap metal into a crude weapon. "You think we're gonna make it much longer out here?" Liam's voice cut through the silence. Eva didn't answer immediately. She didn't know what to say. She'd wondered the same thing herself countless times. But her job was to keep them going, to give them hope, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. "We'll make it," she said finally. "We always do," Liam scoffed, shaking his head. "Yeah, sure. We'll just keep scraping by until one day we're all too weak to fight anymore." "Great plan." Eva shot him a look. "If you've got a better idea, let's hear it." Liam fell silent, his jaw tight. He didn't have an answer either. The next morning, Eva led a small team out to the northern sector. Liam, Kay, and two younger kids, Myra and Kira, followed closely behind her as they navigated the rocky landscape. The air was colder up here, and the wind howled through the jagged cliffs like a living thing, shrieking in their ears. They reached the edge of a deep canyon by midday, its walls lined with ancient mining equipment, long abandoned and rusting away. Eva motioned for the group to stop, her eyes scanning the canyon floor below. There, half buried in the dust, was a massive structure unlike anything they had seen before. It wasn't human. The architecture was far too advanced, too strange. It was alien. "What the hell is that?" Liam muttered, stepping closer to the edge. Eva narrowed her eyes, her mind racing. They had been on Velos 13 for nearly 2 years, and not once had they seen any signs of alien life. But these a broken bar. This changed everything. "We're going down," she said, her voice firm. "Are you crazy?" Kai said, his face pale. "We don't know what that is. We don't know what's down there." "We have to know," Eva replied. "If there's anything down there that can help USA supplies, technology, anything, it could be our only chance." Reluctantly, the group followed her down into the canyon. The structure loomed larger as they descended, its smooth black surface shimmering faintly in the weak light of Velos 13's distant sun. As they approached, Eva felt a strange pull, an almost magnetic force drawing her closer. The entrance to the structure was a massive archway, its surface inscribed with symbols none of them could read. Eva led the way inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was stale, thick with the smell of decay. The walls were lined with strange, glowing panels, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. They ventured deeper into the alien ruin, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Something felt off. The deeper they went, the heavier the air seemed to grow, pressing down on them like a weight they couldn't shake. Then, they heard it, a faint, high-pitched sound, like the buzzing of insects. Eva froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The others heard it too, their eyes wide with fear. Myra, check that corridor, Eva whispered, pointing to the right. Liam, Kira, stay with me. Kai and Myra moved cautiously toward the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a scream. Eva spun around just in time to see Kai stumble out of the corridor, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. Behind him, Myra was lying on the ground, convulsing, her body jerking violently as if something inside her was trying to get out. What happened? Eva shouted, rushing over to Kai. I don't know, Kai stammered, his voice shaking. Broken bar. She was bit by something. Something in the walls. A broken bar. It moved so fast. A broken bar. Eva knelt beside Myra, her hands shaking as she tried to hold the girl still. But it was no use. Myra's body contorted in unnatural ways, her eyes rolling back in her head. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the convulsions stopped. Myra lay still, her breathing shallow, her skin pale and clammy. What the hell is going on? Liam demanded, his voice tight with fear. Eva shook her head, trying to keep her own fear at bay. We need to get her back to the camp. Now. They carried Myra back to the surface, but by the time they reached the camp, it was too late. Myra was gone. But what terrified Eva the most wasn't her death. It was the way her eyes had glazed over in those final moments, the way her body had twitched and contorted as if something else had taken control. We're leaving this place, Eva announced that evening, her voice shaking with the weight of her decision. Whatever's down there, broken bar, it's dangerous. We can't stay here. But it was too late. The alien parasite, the Eldrith, had already started its invasion. That night, Kai fell ill. He had been bitten too, though he hadn't said anything. His body convulsed in the same horrifying way Myra's had, and when he opened his eyes, they weren't his own anymore. It spread quickly after that. More and more of the orphans began to exhibit strange behavior, mood swings, paranoia, bursts of uncontrollable rage. Some, like Kira, hid their symptoms, hoping it would go away. But it never did. The Eldrith parasite wasn't just infecting their bodies, it was taking over their minds, turning them into something else entirely. And the worst part was, the infected orphans still looked like themselves. They still walked, talked, and acted like the friends Eva had grown up with. But inside, they were no longer human. Eva, Liam, and a handful of uninfected orphans barricaded themselves inside one of the old mining stations, desperately trying to figure out what to do. The infected were outside, banging on the walls, their voices distorted by the alien parasite that controlled them. We can't stay here forever, Liam said, pacing back and forth. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, his hands trembling. We need to end this. Now. How? Eva asked, her voice hollow. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She had led them into this nightmare, and now she had no idea how to get them out. We go back, Liam said, his voice low but resolute. We go back to the ruins and destroy whatever's controlling them. Eva stared at him, her mind racing. The idea was insane. But what other choice did they have? Eva took a deep breath, staring into Liam's eyes. She knew he was right. There was no more running from this. The infected were growing in number, and with each day, they became more aggressive, more cunning. The Eldrith parasite wasn't just controlling their bodies, it was learning, evolving. Soon, it wouldn't just be a handful of orphans, the entire camp would be lost, and then it would spread beyond Velos 13, maybe even further into the galaxy. All right, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We'll go back, but we need a plan. We can't just charge in there blindly." Liam nodded, his jaw clenched. He wasn't one for detailed strategies, but even he knew they couldn't afford mistakes. Not now. They gathered the others, only 6 of them left, including Kira, who had started showing signs of infection. Eva watched her carefully. Kira still seemed herself, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something alien, something not quite right. But Eva couldn't afford to leave her behind. They needed every able body for this mission. And part of her still hoped there was a way to save them, even though she knew, deep down, that it was too late. As they set out, the desolation of Velos 13 seemed even more oppressive than usual. The landscape, once merely bleak, now felt alive with menace. Every shadow seemed to pulse with unseen danger. Every gust of wind carried the faint, high-pitched buzz of the Eldritch's influence. The infected weren't far behind. Eva could feel it. Their presence was like a cold weight on the back of her neck, always watching, always waiting. The trip back to the ruins was faster than their initial descent. They moved with purpose now, driven by the knowledge that this was their last chance. The alien structure loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, its strange architecture casting twisted shadows in the fading light. As they reached the entrance, the pulsing glow of the alien symbols seemed stronger than before, as if the Eldritch knew they were coming. "This is it," Liam said, gripping his makeshift weapon tightly. "We go in, find the core of this thing, and blow it to hell." Eva nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Eldritch had let them leave once, but it wouldn't make the same mistake again. Inside, the air was thick and oppressive, every breath a struggle. The glow from the walls was brighter now, casting eerie reflections on their faces. Eva led the way, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to focus, to push down the rising panic, but the memory of Mara's convulsing body, the sound of her bones cracking under the parasite's control, wouldn't leave her mind. The deeper they went, the more they began to hear Ida the buzzing, louder now, like a swarm of insects surrounding them. Kira stumbled, clutching her head, her face twisted in pain. "It's in my head," she gasped, her eyes wild. "I can't, a broken bar, I can't stop it." Eva rushed to her side, but Kira pushed her away, staggering to her feet. "I'm fine," she growled through clenched teeth, but the flicker in her eyes was back, stronger than before. Liam gave Eva a look, one that said they couldn't trust Kira anymore. But Eva shook her head. They needed her, if only for a little longer. They pressed on, deeper into the ruins, until they reached the central chamber. It was massive, the walls lined with alien technology far beyond their comprehension. And in the center of it all was the HFY pulsating, organic mass that writhed and shimmered with life. The heart of the Eldritch. Eva's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The source of the infection. The thing that had turned their friends into monsters. "We plant the explosives here," Liam said, already moving to set the charges. "Once this thing blows, it's over." But as he approached the hive, the air seemed to shift, growing heavier, thicker. The buzzing intensified, drowning out everything else. And then, from the shadows, the infected emerged. They were faster than before. Eva barely had time to react as one of them lunged at her, its eyes glowing with that terrible alien light. She swung her weapon, connecting with its jaw, but the creature barely flinched. It was no longer human. None of them were. The room erupted into chaos. The infected swarmed them, their movements unnaturally fast, their strength overwhelming. Eva fought with everything she had, but for every one she knocked down, 2 more seemed to take its place. She caught sight of Liam, surrounded, his back against the hive as he desperately fought to keep them at bay. "Kira!" Eva shouted, looking for the girl, but she was gone. Eva's stomach twisted in fear. Kira had been right beside her a moment ago. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her arm. One of the infected had grabbed her, its fingers digging into her skin. Eva cried out, struggling to break free, but its grip was like iron. The parasite had made them stronger, more resilient. "Liam!" she screamed, but he was too far away, buried under a swarm of infected. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw her, Kira, standing at the edge of the room, watching, her eyes glowing with the same alien light as the infected number. Eva's heart sank. Kira was gone. Before she could process what was happening, Kira moved, faster than Eva thought possible. She darted across the room, straight toward the explosives Liam had set. "No!" Eva shouted, but it was too late. Kira reached the charges and, with a swift motion, disarmed them. Liam saw it too. He let out a roar of frustration, fighting his way toward Kira, but the infected blocked his path. Kira turned to face them, her face twisted into a mocking smile. "You can't stop it," she said, her voice distorted, almost unrecognizable. "The Eldritch is too strong. You'll all become part of it soon." Eva's mind raced. They were out of time, out of options. The explosives were their only chance, and Kira had just taken that away from them. But then she saw it. A small console on the far side of the room, connected to the hive. If they couldn't blow it up, maybe they could shut it down. "Liam!" she shouted, pointing to the console. "We need to get there." Liam nodded, understanding immediately. He fought his way through the swarm, cutting down infected with brutal efficiency. Eva followed, her heart pounding in her chest. They were so close. But the infected weren't giving up. They came at them from all sides, relentless in their pursuit. One of them grabbed Liam, pulling him down. He struggled, but there were too many. Eva screamed his name, but there was nothing she could do. The infected swarmed him, their bodies writhing as they consumed him. Tears streamed down Eva's face as she reached the console. She didn't know how to use it, but there was no time to think. She pressed buttons, pulled levers, anything to stop the Eldritch. The hive shuddered. The pulsing slowed. For a moment, the buzzing in her head quieted. But then the Eldritch fought back. The hive throbbed with renewed energy, and the infected seemed to grow stronger. Eva's vision blurred, her head pounding with the alien presence inside her mind. She had to end this. Now, with a final, desperate move, she slammed her fist onto the console's main control. The room exploded into light. The hive let out a deafening scream, the walls vibrating with its fury. And then, silence. The infected dropped to the ground, their bodies still, lifeless. The buzzing stopped. The hive was dead. Eva collapsed to the floor, her body shaking. It was over. When she finally opened her eyes, the room was quiet. Liam was gone. The others were gone. She was alone. The last orphan on Velos 13. She stood slowly, her body aching, her mind numb. The Eldritch was gone, but so was everything else. Eva walked out of the ruins, the wind howling around her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope.